Hello, and welcome back to Owens Bay. Well, I think the southern region of the map is pretty much finished, and I can't be happier with the results. I think it looks amazing down here. There's still a couple of small detailing projects left to be done, like this construction site below here, but we're going to return to those at a later date to finish them. In this episode, we're going to be returning to where this whole region started, the starter city of New Sunderland. I said New Sunderland had a whole bunch of problems. I might have overstated that a little bit. Its biggest problem is that it's unfinished. And being a starter city, it suffers from all the typical issues that starter cities suffer from. And we're going to spend some time correcting some of those and just finishing off the town. In this episode, we're going to be focusing most of our attention on finishing the rapid transit system between Farwell and New Sunderland and all the detailing work associated with it, and create a new neighborhood in the process. My name is Gives, and let's get started. We're just going to stay in cinematic mode here for just a little bit as I do a brief overview of the city of New Sunderland. New Sunderland actually is the starter city in this region, and it actually predates the YouTube series. When I built the city, it was never with the intention to put it out for public viewing, and because of that, a lot of my laziness is going to be showing through here, as I wasn't really too concerned at this time of being completing things. One of the main issues with New Sunderland is it kind of suffers from the general issue that a lot of starter cities suffer from, is a lack of context. When I started building here, other than the general idea that I wanted to build something in the Pacific Northwest, I didn't really have any idea what was going to go where, how different regions related to each other. And so it's kind of like this, isolated thing that doesn't have any real reason to be there. So that develops over time, and now that I've built out a bit of Queensport and finished off the southern section of the map, now we have a bit more context. So now New Sunderland can have a bit more of an identity, which is what the next few episodes are about, like really making New Sunderland its own unique place. At the time I built this town, it was like 8 months ago, so a lot of the modding tools we have available now didn't exist. We didn't have a lot of the assets we have now, and there's been several issues that have kind of plagued the town for quite some time now. A lot of the town has upgraded uncontrollably, so I have these massive towers where I never intended towers to be. The downtown core is probably a little more dense than it needs to be. I also have these very unfinished areas like what we're looking at down here. The rail line just stops abruptly and doesn't go anywhere. We're going to fix all that. I think this right where we're looking at now, that's going to become a port area. It now makes some sense that New Sunderland would have been a port city in its earlier days. So we're going to build out a facility that reflects that. It's not going to be a functioning port. I don't have the space for that. Hopefully, maybe in the future, if we get smaller port assets, maybe I can come back and think about that. The biggest project we're going to be working on is connecting the rapid transit system from Farwell to New Sunderland, and that's going to cut through this area we're looking at right now. It's going to kind of come in along the highway here and snake through town, and it creates a opportunity to create a unique neighborhood. And we're looking at where that's going to be right down below here. I'm also going to come in and switch out some of the service buildings for buildings I think are probably a little more appropriate for the scale of the town. Like, we're going to get rid of that hospital. It's absurdly large for a city this size. And just a lot of general detailing work. A lot of it's probably not going to, I'm probably not going to show a lot of it. It's just detailing what's already there. And I don't really think that's going to be all that interesting. Obviously, I'll show the more interesting detailing projects, but for the most part, a lot of that's going to be off camera. Anyway, I think that's it. And let's get started with the actual build. Okay, first things first, we're going to take care of some of the service buildings here and switch them out. And we're going to start with this ridiculously oversized hospital. We're not going to get rid of it completely. I'm just going to plop it over here in Queensport. Queensport doesn't actually have a hospital yet, so it's in desperate need. So we're just going to reuse the building. And we're going to switch it out with this much smaller looking hospital, which fits the Skyline much better. And we're just going to do a bit of detailing work to get it to fit in our chosen spot here. The detailing work here is pretty basic. I'm not going to get too crazy of anything. It's just incorporating the new building into the existing lot. And delete off some of the more silly signage on the building. So I have about 4 or 5 projects in mind for New Sunderland to finish it off. And like I was saying, for this episode, it's primarily going to be the rapid transit system, just making that initial connection. The trick for me is to stay focused on task and not get constantly distracted by side projects, which I sometimes tend to do. One thing that was really obvious is a hospital, and I have almost no parking. I'm going to add a bit of extra parking. It's probably still not sufficient, but it's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to just obliterate the entire neighborhood just to put down parking lots. This should suffice, and at least gives the impression that there is parking available. One of the problems with New Sunderland is the education system. I don't really have enough schools, so we're going to rectify that by adding a couple of extra elementary and high schools. For this neighborhood, I wasn't exactly sure what elementary school to use, so we're going to go with this UK one. The age of the building is a bit of concern, but there are, school buildings of this style from, say the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. They would have been built then. It's not quite right, but it's close enough. That happened over here was there's been several times where the tree controller mod disabled itself, like the save game settings sometimes don't save, and so there's been several times where the trees just started aging, and that's why everything looks dead and I have to go fix it. Right here we're going to be adding another high school. This is in a completely unfinished part of town. It's more of an upper class area. The college on the top of the hill there, I'm not really treating it as a college. I'm more thinking of it as like a private school, and I'm going to create a path between the two to sort of suggest that these two educational buildings are associated with one another. Here I realized that the high school I actually used wasn't upgraded, so we're going to do that. And I'm also going to add another small elementary school in this neighborhood just to bump up education numbers just a little bit more. This essentially brings education for elementary and high school up to break even. We're doing quite well for college and university, but we have to keep an eye on the other ones to make sure we're not falling behind. I'm going to place the first station for our elevated rapid transit system here. I decided to make it elevated and above ground. There's several other people have also expressed this, but I think, if I'm going to go out to the trouble of putting in a transit system, I want to see it. I don't want to hide it underground. It's just like, that's efficient, and for large urban centers, it might be necessary, but for here, I got the space. So let's make it visible. Now, the biggest problem was trying to figure out how to get it under this spaghetti interchange here. I thought maybe going over top of it, but it seemed like it was going to be way too high above the road, so I decided to cut a trench underneath. And yeah, this takes a bit of work to get it to fit, and it looks like quite the mess until it's actually finished. Now, when it comes to slopes and gradients for our rail system and the transit system, I'm not necessarily going for absolute realism for gradients, slope percentages and that sort of thing. I'm just going for as long as it doesn't look wrong. So the slopes can be a little more extreme than they would be in the real world. As long as it doesn't look like crazy or anything like that, I'm perfectly okay with it. There has to be some compromises made here, otherwise, it would make placing these sorts of systems a lot more challenging. An interesting challenge, but not one I'm particularly interested in personally. When we see the rail line here, it may look a little steep. And now what's kind of happening is there's a bit of an optical illusion happening here with the retaining wall, the shadows, and the curve to make it look more like a roller coaster ride than an actual transit system. In reality, the line is not that steep, at least when you're on it or riding along with it. It doesn't seem that bad, so we're gonna go with it. And there goes our first train. And the line is all screwed up here. I just put in something really, really fast just to check it out, see how well it ran. It's a little bit bumpy and wiggly in here. I don't mind that. And actually, it gave me the idea that, you know, if you did that on purpose, like if you're putting on like a train line and you just knock the alignment out on the nodes of the track just a little bit, and slow down the speeds, you can get a nice, you know, jiggly kind of train effect happening with it, right? You know, bumping and kind of wiggling around, which, you know, if done on purpose, you know, for certain effects, that would be quite interesting. Here, I didn't do it on purpose. It's just the way I built things. My thinking here was, this is like essentially the lowest section of the dip in the track. And obviously this is going to be an area where water is going to collect. So I thought there should be some sort of drainage system down here to be able to get the water out of there. Unfortunately, we don't have anything like drain pipes or anything like that. The smokestacks would work, but they all produce smoke, and so that's not useful. And the pipes we have don't really play the part very well. It's just going to be a concrete basin for the moment. And I imagine the kids are gonna find their way down here and graffiti it and tag it and all that sort of stuff as well. And our end stop for this segment of the line is going to be directly beside the train station. Now, the big problem with this was exactly where am I going to put the line? And I did consider, you know, dipping it under the town for this segment, but in the end I decided to just be brutal about it and just cut it right through the entire neighborhood. And when I do this, it pretty much seals the fate for what this particular neighborhood is going to be about. Obviously, the construction of such a rail line over a neighborhood so close to residential buildings is going to have a impact on what that neighborhood is going to be like. And what a perfect spot for a skate park, right under the rail line. And in this particular case, the fact that it's full of homeless is actually a bonus. Now, for some reason, I decided to switch out the cars for the tram cars. I'm not sure why. Now that I'm looking back at it, it doesn't make any sense. It looks absolutely ridiculous. I do come to my senses and I do switch it back eventually. I think what I was thinking about here is I like the style of the car, and I wish I had a different option for the actual types of cars on the track. And I entertained the idea that maybe this might work, but you know, the more I looked at it, the more wrong it looked. And so yeah, it will get switched back. Okay, I'm going to be switching out some of the other service buildings in this neighborhood. There's kind of a cluster of them. The first is the fire station. The services I put in here were for essentially a starter city, and obviously New Sunderland is a little larger than that now, so it needs more substantial services. Crematorium no longer seems to fit in there. I'm going to just place these over at this undeveloped section of town for the time being. I still want the services, I just don't want them necessarily here. For the crematorium, I'm going to switch it out with the French one. Totally inadequate for the town, but still adds a bit of surface. Where the transit system comes into town, it is right beside the highway, so it's extremely noisy and polluted and not a fun area to be, so the neighborhood is going to reflect that. I wanted to put in a little kind of a custom building here, and just kind of thinking of a used car lot, or maybe something more like an auto wrecker. Not quite an auto wrecker, but well, you'll see as I build it out here. So we're using the taxi garage, I believe, and a warehouse building. These are all just props, so I can put them exactly where I wanted them without needing a road connection for them. I think I went a little overboard on the stains on this building. I have some custom used car signage I wanted to use here, but while I was building this, I was having a lot of issues with the picker tool. It seemed that every time I tried to use it, it just crashed the game. So I just skipped it for the moment. When that tool is behaving better, I will come back and add the signage. I also decided that I needed a new police station. Like I was saying earlier, I need to do a bit of detailing work around the city in general. It needs a lot of work, and I won't include all of it. I will include little bits if it seems relevant. This is right next to where we're working, so I'm going to include this bit. Now I have to delete all this stuff away to make this more appropriate for the part of town it is located in. I guess the main theme for this section of town is pavement. There's a section of video that's missing here. I guess I just forgot to hit record or something because I can't locate it. Unfortunately, that happens from time to time. I have no idea how that happened. I do apologize. I jump around all over the place here as I'm working on it. I kind of like work on part of something, get distracted by something else, work on that, come back. So it's kind of this back and forth process. Here I thought a little strip mall would be an interesting addition. Just spent a bit of time integrating it all together so it looks like one continuous building. As I detail out this area, it becomes more and more obvious it's not a desirable place to live in town. We have the highway, we have the elevated transit system. We also have the rail lines that are going to be occupying a huge area right next to it. So it's noisy. It's not exactly industrial, but it's like industrial adjacent. So yeah, it's not a place people really want to live. And because of that, it kind of attracts, certain type of crowd, and that is reflected throughout the neighborhood. property values around here wouldn't be extremely high, so there'd be a lot of empty lots. Any guesses into how many dogs Jessica has here? Anybody? Anybody have any idea? Jessica has 29 dogs. I couldn't believe it when I looked at it. At that point, I decided to install the No More Dogs mod. Not that I have anything against dogs, obviously, but I think the dogs are bugged, and I had to stop to think about how much of my computer resources are being consumed simulating dogs. So this is why you spade and neuter your pets, people. It's kind of difficult to turn this particular detailing build into an episode because it's not really a neighborhood. It's just kind of like it is a transitional area between neighborhoods. I'm going to be bringing back a lot of the buildings in here over the next few episodes. These really super tall buildings, they were never intended to be on the skyline. It always was meant to be a fairly low skyline. New Sunderland isn't like an exciting place. This is also something else that's kind of been developing. I think New Sunderland's going to take on more or less an older appearance. A little, maybe some sections of this town are going to be a lot more run down, and it's probably going to have a bit more of a industrial flavor by the time I'm finished with it, or at least certain sections of it will. Now, I don't know if this is going to be the final skyline. I'm just putting some buildings out just to see what it looks like. I might adjust this a little bit. This is the height for the skyline for New Sunderland. I don't want to go above that. Forgot to record a couple sections of the build here, and it also seemed to lost a save or two in there as well somehow. So some of this may change a bit. I think what happened is there were a couple times where the game crashed on me, so I think in one of those crashes I lost some work and it just didn't get repeated. I'm not sure if this crematorium is actually functional. It doesn't seem to be doing anything. And I'm going to be reusing some of the advertisements from Lower Queensport. I've said this before, these decals take too much time to create, and just use them as a one-off, it doesn't make much sense. So I'm going to have to reuse some of them. Lining these things up can be really quite the pain. Some of this signage was meant to be used in Lower Queensport, but I never used it there, so we're going to use some of it here. Most of my detailing work in this section of the city is focusing on the surfaces. The primary view for a lot of this is from above, so the surfaces are kind of the major detailing that happens for them. Now, right in here, the houses were really bothering me. They seem totally out of place, so we're going to be replacing these with low-income housing. And it makes a lot of sense for this location. We are just a short walk away from the transit system, so a housing project like this makes a lot of sense for this area. And we're going to be using the UK assets for this. They are very suitable for this. These could be at any city, honestly, not just a UK city. And that brings us to the end of this episode. It's kind of a bit of an in-between episode, to be honest. But it is work that needs to be done as well. So if you've stuck around to the end, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate people who stick around for the entire video. And judging by the statistics for the channel, there's a fair number of people who do. So thank you. And I will see you all next time. Bye.